Getting to know Grace on Cuddle podcast. Hello, my beautiful listeners. I hope you're doing well. Welcome back. And if you're new here, hello. My name is Felicity Azra. I've been a professional cuddler since March of 2018. What you're currently listening to is the world's first and only podcast on the cuddle industry. Today, I have a lovely guest. Her name is Grace. She has been trained as a cuddleist. Grace is a cuddle event coordinator and an end-of-life doula. That really stood out to me. So if you've listened to my interview of Sam Varnerin, you may recall I said I would love to interview a death doula, and Sam said actually there is a professional cuddler who is a certified death doula. So this has been quite serendipitous. According to the About page on Grace's website, quote, I found professional cuddling when I was in grief myself. Both of my parents had died within 10 weeks of each other. My relationship ended shortly after that. I really needed comfort and it was nowhere to be found. I struggled deeply, feeling very alone. I saw a video about professional cuddling and I thought I could participate in that and I need that. But it was another year before I found a group cuddling event nearly an hour away from my home. I knew I needed cuddling, so I went. Afterwards, I was surprised to find that I was in a good mood for a week and a half. That's when I knew that this work was significant and important. I decided to learn how to become a professional cuddler and take advantage of one of my superpowers, the ability to be present with someone when they are feeling intense, deep feelings, unquote. There's more to her bio, but I'll let y'all visit her website in your own time. Enough dilly-dallying. Let's get on with the interview. How do you say cuddling in your language? We're stuck in legal limbo because sex work isn't decriminalized yet. Why is there a Wikipedia page for cuddle parties, but not for professional cuddling? No, Felicity, it's facilitator, not felicitator. It's not a replacement for therapy, but it is therapeutic.
My name is Grace Heer. I live in Southern California. I have been a professional cuddler since 2018, and I have a whole bunch of other certifications and interests.
All of your certifications are fascinating. I myself have never tried hypnotherapy. I've done somatic therapy, I've group talk therapy, I've done solo talk therapy, but never hypnotherapy.
We'll do it chronologically. I'm a certified professional coactive coach, which is a particular style of life coaching. The most important thing that I love about that style is we as coaches, we assume that our clients are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. So there's nothing wrong. We don't have to fix you. We're there to support. I have studied neurolinguistic programming or NLP and a little bit of hypnotherapy. So that was in 2014. In 18, I took my cuddle training and I became certified as an individual cuddler as well as a group facilitator. Just this year, I completed training as a Reiki 2 practitioner.
I know so little about Reiki and neuralistic programming. Will you please enlighten me?
I will, but you know what? I forgot one. The one that you're like really interested in. In 2020, I trained as an end-of-life doula. So neurolinguistic programming is about how do we talk to ourselves and relate with our unconscious mind. There's the assumption that there are lots of parts in our unconscious and sometimes they don't play well together. So like, oh, there's part of me that wants to get up and go running and the other part wants to sit on the couch and watch Ted Lasso and eat chips. There's that conflict. Then we get to have conversation with both of those sides and resolve those conflicts so that we can live our better life.
I recently stopped going to somatic therapy, but one of the lessons my therapist taught me was that every human being is a system. I'll use myself as an example. There's a part of me that wants to know everything that will happen in advance, and there's a part of me that wishes they could influence another person's behavior, and then there's a part of me that wishes that I was able to pick up on skills at a quicker pace, and there's just so many parts to all of us. We can't talk to every single part of us at the same time. We got to address each one individually.
Yes, absolutely right. And one of the things too is that each part sort of has an equal opposite. So if there's a part that's beating you up for wanting to, the two parts that are in conflict, they may be in conflict, but they both want the same goal. And they're both just kind of not doing a very good job of communicating and supporting. So once we can get those two parts communicating with one another and understanding that, oh, well, I want the same thing that you want. Well, okay, why don't we work together? In NLP speak, that's called parts integration, putting them together so that there's not that inner conflict.
Do you think a person could ever get to a point where they don't have any inner conflict?
That's called enlightenment, and isn't that what the Buddha was searching for?
Do you think that can be achieved through Reiki?
No, Reiki is about energy. The practice of Reiki is sort of channeling energy, like divine energy, through my body to the client or to whomever is receiving. It's less about parts integration and more about energy. So I'm thinking the connection is less neurological and more physical. Although one of the things, I participated in a Reiki circle yesterday. At the end, when you've spent a lot of time with Reiki, there's a little bit of the same thing that happens after a good cuddle, sort of an oxytocin high, and it just feels really good and relaxing and la la la.
I don't think I've asked any questions pertaining to professional cuddling, but I was browsing your website before this call began. I noticed you have some cuddle workshops for this month. That's exciting. And so, are all of them through Cuddle Sanctuary? Is it just the virtual ones? You're hosting it by yourself? Like, how do your cuddle workshops work?
It's a great question. My cuddle workshops, I host. Cuddle Sanctuary is kind enough to post my events on their meetup and share about them on their social media, but it's my event. And they're kind enough to do that for all of their graduates. Other folks, you can find their events on Cuddle Sanctuary as well, or through Cuddle Sanctuary, but it is a Graceful Cuddles event. Yeah, Cuddle Sanctuary, I consider that Jean, who owns Cuddle Sanctuary, is my mentor and a tremendous support.
Besides Jean Franzblau, have you been mentored by other people in the cuddle industry?
I have actually. I've also been trained by cuddlists, so I consider that Madeline Guanazo and Keely Shoup are strong examples and mentors for all the folks that they work with. Not exactly mentors, but my experience with the cuddle community is that everyone, all of the practitioners that I've met, have been super supportive, caring, and we really want each other to succeed. There's enough success for everybody. Let's all get it.
That melts my heart. And you answered one of the questions I prepared, which is, what has your experience with other cuddle therapists been like?
So, well, I'm curious what your experience has been.
For the first 2 years that I was a pro cuddler, I did meet up with other pro cuddlers. It was outside of work. For example, one person I met up with, we just chit-chatted at a coffee shop. We did discuss work, we exchanged phone numbers, and after she quit pro cuddling, I actually got a text message from her one day saying she decided to become a mother. That made me so happy to hear that even though we met through Cuddle Comfort, after she left, she still wanted to tell me about her life. So that really warmed my heart. There was this other pro cuddler in my area who was introduced to me through mutual clients. I don't know if she's still a pro cuddler, but we did exchange numbers, and then at some point we stopped talking to each other. But the first 2 years I barely met other people. I was fortunate enough to meet other people in person who were local to my area. I am in the midst of contacting professional cuddlers in the Washington, D.C. area because I will be in Baltimore in 1 week. I've contacted Jasmine Simone, whom
Love
I've
her.
already interviewed. One of the things that blows my mind about some professional cuddlers is that they will give speeches at conferences for psychologists. There's this one called ASEC, but I know that several people who are big names in the United States went to ASEC and spoke about cuddle therapy, assuming they're in San Francisco next year. I hope in 2024, professional cuddlers who give presentations there reach out to me and say, hey, I know you have this podcast. I know you like to talk to other pro cuddlers. Let's meet up in person. Let's get off our screens and meet face to face.
Well, and you could do the same. So did you reach out to, I know that Michelle Renee was there at ASAC. Did you reach out to her?
I reached out to Keely. I did not reach out to Michelle, and unfortunately, Keely could not fit me into her busy schedule.
Yeah, shucks.
But Michelle is wonderful. I've spoken to Michelle over the phone before.
Yeah, good.
Does your doula job ever interfere with your snuggly job?
So let's talk about death doula work for a minute. A lot of folks don't even understand or know what a death doula is. I will say that I took the training in 2020 to become a death doula. I had already done some training about grief support, grief coaching, that kind of thing, because grief, if you take like one glance at my website, you know that grief is super important to me because we're not supported in our culture right now. Grief is sort of swept under the rug. That's not okay to me. My own experience, I was blindsided. I knew that I was going to be sad, but I had no idea that grief was going to affect my neurological function, my sleep, my body, my energy, my focus. I had no idea. So I started training. I did some work around after I got through the bulk of my grief work. I learned about this death doula work, which is helping people who, well, they're approaching the end of life, whether it's a terminal diagnosis or some other thing. They're approaching the end of life and they just want some extra support. And that support can look like anything from helping people make sure that their affairs are in order, that they have a trust or a will in place, that they know where things are going and how things are going to work, that somebody to project manage their dying process or their treatment process, who's going to make the meals, when can people come and visit. And it can mean simply coming to be with the person who is dying, sitting vigil, or helping them be honored as a human until they actually die. Death doula work it spreads that whole spectrum.
Is a majority of your work meeting with people face to face? Is it mostly?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not doing a whole lot of doula work right now. I do have several grief clients. And I took the doula training because I had the interest, but also because it was this 8-module training and 2 of the modules were on grief. Taking that knowledge, grief from the perspective of the dying person, as well as from the perspective of their family or their loved ones.
Is a majority of your work face to face?
It's about half and half right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the first several years of my adulthood, I only did in-person therapy. I did not try to do virtual therapy until 2020. That lasted for less than a week. For me personally, I think I could only do virtual therapy if I've already met up with a therapist in person and I got along with them. I don't know if you ever hear about that, but that's just what works for me.
Everyone has a different flavor. I know that in 2020, those of us in the cuddle world, really had to pivot, using my least favorite word in the language now. We really had to shift because, okay, I can't see people in person. How do I support my client? I shifted from in-person to virtual groups. It became more about creating community than the actual physical touch. I did talk a lot about self-soothing. There can be self-soothing touch. There can be self-soothing activities that we do. Typically, I would put folks into a breakout room and allow them to play around with those self-soothing activities together. It was valuable, not optimal, but valuable.
That's good to hear. That reminds me of my experiences with group therapy because I've been in so many group therapy circles. Some where it was a different group of people every single week, and then there were some where it's the same five faces for several months straight. Was your experience like the same five faces every time, different people? How was it?
There were some folks who came every time, and then there were some folks who would drop in. There were folks who came one time and never came back. It was a spectrum.
Was it a once a week thing, twice a week, once every 2 weeks? How often was it?
I ended up with once a week for about 7, 8 months. I was doing once a week virtually.
That's impressive. I was a part of my parents' health insurance, and part of that included mental health. Kaiser Permanente, they had two different group therapy circles, one on this day of the week and one on this day of the week, and one had to get disintegrated because less people would show up every single time. It got to the point where I would literally be the only patient who would appear for group therapy. And that made me very sad because I don't think it was because people finally got the help that they needed and I was the only person left. How do you cope with that if less and less people are showing up to these community circles?
Yeah, that was a thing. At the end of COVID, well, in air quotes, end of COVID, when things were beginning to open up, people were going back to work, people were seeing people in person, and it was clear that the virtual groups were not as valuable as they had been, or not as valued as they had been. And I had other commitments that were taking my energy. So it just finally came to a place of, and then actually in March of 22, I had surgery and I knew I was going to need some time to heal from that. February of 22 is when I stopped doing my virtual groups. The audience wasn't there as much and I needed to focus on something else.
Thank you for sharing that. As a professional cuddler, every once in a while I'll get clients and I say to them, I don't think what you're looking for is a professional cuddler. I think, insert occupation, I think this would fit your needs better. You ever experience that with any kind of client?
Oh, for sure. I've referred folks to therapists. I've referred to other physical practitioners of some kind.
How do they normally react? Do they ever actually go through with it?
I don't know.
Okay.
That part is not my business. My business to say, I don't think I'm the right person to serve you, or I would be happy to serve you if you also would try this service as well. If they're not willing to, or choose not to, or whatever, not my business. I get to offer and they can take it or not. Just like anytime we would offer a hug, right? Would you like to share a hug? And if I get a no, thank you, I say, awesome, that's great. Good.
I wish my past therapists were more like you because I would tell a therapist, hey, this isn't working for me. I'll just say it. In 2020, I tried using this online therapy service. It just was not working. The therapist pretty much was like, oh, well, I'm doing the best I can, and this is not my only job. And so, oh, well.
Huh. Yours is not the first negative review I've heard of online therapy services. I also have heard rumors or mumblings that those therapists are not necessarily licensed. I don't know. The therapists that I hang out with sort of have a negative view of those texting therapy services and stuff. I think that therapist's response was my reaction to that is, really? Like, you could just say, okay, thanks. It sounded like they got defensive. I'm doing the best I can. Well, okay, that's not what I asked, or that wasn't my thought, I'm just having a reaction to that.
I know not everybody is like me, but when I see a therapist, I want to speak to them for at least 50 minutes. And one of the things I disliked about the whole app-based therapy was that I could only speak to my therapist for a maximum 30 minutes. And it's like, I don't want to have a video call with my therapist for only 30 minutes. How much can we actually accomplish in half an hour? Have you ever heard of half-hour therapy sessions?
In the coaching world, like 30 to 45 minutes is actually a typical coaching call, but coaching is different than therapy. There is a lot that can be done, but I don't think I've ever heard of a therapist that has just 30-minute sessions. Yeah, and I've never had a 30-minute session with a therapist. My current therapist is on, we do see each other virtually, but it's a full session, full hour.
I do not offer half-hour cuddles, but I have met people who do. I really do think you can probably get more out of a 30-minute cuddle session than just texting a therapist every couple of hours.
Yeah, I don't offer 30-minute sessions either. For me, it's not worth it. I see my clients in a shared space, and so I have to go and set up and tear down. I hate to say not worth my time, but it's kind of not worth my time.
The last somatic therapist I had, she said something that none of my previous therapists ever said to me. I told her that I would like to stop seeing her, and then she said, well, normally when clients stop seeing me, we have this, I don't even know how to phrase it, but she basically was saying, well, you need to tell me. I'll pull it up right now. If the first time I ever met her, she told me this was her policy, I would have been fine. But since she was telling me this after I said, let's stop communication, it left a very sour taste in my mouth. She said verbatim, if it's stopping sessions altogether, I usually do a closure conversation for clients, unquote. She never said if I had to pay her for a final session. I was flabbergasted because I knew deep down in my heart that I don't owe a therapist an explanation as to why I want to stop seeing them or pause therapy altogether. But it did make me feel some type of way inside. Like, is somatic therapy in general not for me? Do I need to pursue a different type of therapy, like hypnotherapy? I didn't really know what to feel when I got that email.
I do know folks who, when ending a therapeutic relationship, do want to have some kind of closure. If it's having the final session and saying, here's what I've learned, here's what I have gained, here's what I have lost, here's, whatever, and having just sort of like a closing ritual of some kind, I can see how that would be beneficial to both the client and the practitioner. But a requirement, I don't know that I would, if I, as a practitioner, am working with someone who doesn't like ritual or, doesn't feel the need for that, okay, peace out. But I personally like to have that ritual. So when I'm ending work with a therapeutic practitioner of any kind, it's nice to have that closure. I had a broken wrist and I had to go to physical therapy. Seeing a physical therapist, we had 12 weeks where we worked together and got my wrist back to function. And at the end, it was, a little graduation moment. Look where you were, look where you are. Yay. If you need us, we're here.
That's so sweet. So when you are consoling the family of somebody who passed, do you have some kind of ritual for when you stop talking to that family altogether?
Yes, I typically work with folks individually on grief as opposed to like the full family, or I might talk with people individually. Typically, I have some programs, an 8-week program where I work with folks. And then if they want additional, we can continue until they feel like they're ready to stop. And if we get to the end of that 8 weeks and they feel like, no, I still need some support, great, awesome. They can either buy an additional package, we can go one, week by week.
I do wonder if your work life interferes with your personal life.
I'm pretty diligent to not let it. Sometimes that means I have to let go of expectations for myself. I'm not perfect. I am human. Because at the moment I'm not working with a dying person, I don't need to worry about, oh, sorry, I can't come because I have a whatever, I'm going on vacation, or just don't die yet. I'm not working with that population at this time.
It does seem like there are a lot more Reiki practitioners and hypnotherapists than there are professional cuddlers and end-of-life doulas. Is my perception accurate?
I would imagine so. Yeah.
It is?
Yeah. Cuddling is pretty new, and end-of-life doula work is also pretty new. Or it's really old, but it's resurfacing because our culture is ready for a shift. When it was intergenerational living and grandma was sick or dying, she was there in the home. And now grandma's off at the retirement community or in an assisted living facility. And I understand why, because, our culture is such that there's not the capacity to care for a loved one in your own home. We've also lost so much of the consciousness of death and dying and the wisdom that we can gain from it. That's why the death doula work is coming back into the consciousness of the culture.
That makes me happy. I have spoken about professional cuddling to other podcast hosts. A majority of them think it's awesome, but there's just that 1% of podcast hosts who think it's bizarre and that I don't deserve respect because I do professional cuddling. It's so strange because to me, they have a lot in common. They're both jobs that you'll have to prepare a 10-slide PowerPoint if you want to tell your grandparents how you're able to pay your bills. It never made sense to me why some podcast hosts aren't supportive of me enlightening the masses about cuddle therapy. And so I wonder if you've ever had any experiences from people like hypnotherapists, psychologists, professional cuddlers who think it's odd to be a end-of-life doula.
So far, no. Once I have explained what is an end-of-life doula and they understand the strength and the power and the importance of that work, I get the respect I would hope to get. It's easier to explain to people about end-of-life doula work, and it's more easily accepted than professional cuddling is.
I can see that.
When I've had people say things like, Grace, if it was anybody but you, I would just think it was a front for a little winky winky. Really, really? If it was anybody but you, Grace, I would just assume that they were a sex worker. Okay, there must be something about me that presents as wholesome and respectable, I guess.
Air quotes.
Yeah. But I had in my corporate job telling my general manager and executive, yeah, I'm doing this professional cuddling work. And he's like, what's that? As soon as I mentioned to him, because when I first started in cuddling, what I wanted to do was go to nursing homes, hospitals, places where people get clinical touch, but not nurturing touch. So as soon as I said that, he's like, oh, I get that. Yeah, no, that's important work. So then I took it a step further and I said, yes, it is. And can you also see then that it's important for people who are just living life that also need nurturing touch? Oh, well, yeah, I guess, was his response. If you take it to babies, we all know that babies need touch in their growth, in their life. It's vital for their development. We all know that. We're still human. We still need it. Even as adults, for people who are not in a relationship where nurturing touch is available to them, whether they're just not in a relationship, but a romantic relationship, or they are with someone who's touch averse, or whatever the reason is, it's important. It's important work.
I think you were really able to change his mind, and I admire that about you because I don't know if I just have low self-esteem, but I feel like I can't really change other people's minds. What boggles the minds of people close to me is I feel more comfortable telling my very conservative family that I do sex work. I don't feel comfortable telling them about the podcast. I don't feel comfortable telling them about the professional cuddling, and they're like, why though? Why? And I would rather come out as something that they're familiar with but have a negative view on than to come out as something that they've literally never heard of.
Huh.
It's just so often I do occasionally meet strangers who are like, yeah, I know what professional cuddling is, or I'm a professional cuddler. But I will say 90% of the time, people are like, I've never heard of that before. But a lot of people think if they've never heard of something, then it just must not be a viable, a viable lifestyle or job or whatever. That just is icky.
It's disappointing.
It's disappointing.
It's disappointing when people have a mindset that is not open to learning about new things. Like that friend who said to me, if it was anybody but you, Grace, I would think that it was something shady. Once he realized that it was me and I don't do shady things, and not that sex work is shady, and that's a whole mind shift that we need to give to our culture too. He then was able to like open his mind and be like, oh well, no, I guess yeah, and you're the right person for it, Grace. When I told my parents that I wanted to be a coach. So I started coaching in 2009, was telling my folks about it. And my dad was just like, what? How is that? So you're going to be a therapist? No, Daddy, it's not a therapist. But what is it? It took him a while to kind of get the idea. And I had to actually coach him to get him to a place of acceptance that, oh, no, I guess I see how this is valuable. Okay. So I hope that someday you can have that experience with your family as well.
I really hope so. I once was at a house party with my significant other. These were his friends. I didn't know anyone at this house party. And also, I think I was suffering from spring allergies. I remember I needed to go to a drugstore to pick up Benadryl. I told him I need to go take the car and drive to the nearest drugstore. And he said, okay, I'll go with you. I'm like, you don't need to come with me. I can buy the Benadryl by myself. But he insisted. And so he and we were at the cash register and the cashier was making small talk as he was ringing us up. He looked really young. He looked like he was a high schooler. A part of the small talk was, so what do you guys do for a living? And then my boyfriend said his occupation. And then I said, I'm a professional cuddler. Once I said that, he just immediately ignored me and just kept speaking to my boyfriend. And I know this is not only applicable to my job. I understand that as a society, we tend to value men more than women. So when you're out in public, strangers will, talk to the man first if they talk to the women ever. So it made me feel lonely. Not only was I at a party that was a 90-minute drive away from my house, I didn't know anyone at the party. And even when I had to take a break to go pick up some Benadryl, the cashier ignored me. And it's just, I do worry for when that will happen again, because I do think it'll happen again. We live in a very conservative country. Most people have never heard of our occupations. And so we don't know what I could do the next time it happens.
Yeah. Oh, I just want to coach you about that. Keep my coaching hat off. Yeah, I do. I'm feeling like some reactions to that, but also like, okay, may I ask you a coaching type question?
Please do.
Okay. Why does it matter what that cashier thought?
Because it made me feel even worse than I already did. My sinuses, I think, were acting up. I was forced is not the best word, but I was in an area I was unfamiliar with, and the house contained nobody I knew except for my boyfriend. It compiled.
If I were coaching you, I would ask you, or might invite you to focus more on the other situation and being more comfortable in that situation. What could make that situation more comfortable, so that this other one where there was a perceived slight from someone a very insignificant person in your life, where that one wouldn't matter. Like what was over here? Because I feel like this situation was more important. And I absolutely understand you're in a new situation, new people, you're not comfortable with the area, you don't know, all that. Like I get that for sure. And I feel like, yeah, that little interaction with a total stranger was able to affect you because of this other situation. Yes?
Final nail on the coffin.
And I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Oh, thank you.
And also, those friends of his, I mean, depending on the atmosphere of the party, they could have done a better job at helping you to feel welcomed and comfortable and included in that party.
Thank you so much. I just wish more people would listen to you, because I am getting so much value out of this conversation. Have you ever been interviewed on another podcast, magazine, newspaper, anything like that?
I've done a couple of podcast interviews. I belong to a group called the Nurtured Nerds, and it was started by a gal she's a cuddler and she's a gamer nerd. And she thinks that like, okay, the gamers who need to have some nurturing, and so let's get the cuddlers involved with the nerds so that they can so everybody benefits.
I need to check this out.
Yeah, you totally should. They have weekly nerd breaks where they get together online and play games or talk about different stuff. It's a fun and fascinating group. Very small, but we're beginning to grow, I think.
I can see how that would be beneficial. When I first started meeting other pro cuddlers, we were doing things that had nothing to do with cuddling, and so we should absolutely organize more events only for pro cuddlers that don't have to do with our job. Now I'm thinking about all the fun things I can bring into this group. You know what? I like ending on a positive note, so I think here is a good place to end.
I can't believe that was a quick hour.
It was.
So, can I share a little bit about where folks can find me?
Go right on ahead.
Awesome. So, my website is gracefulcuddles.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at Graceful Cuddles and on Facebook, Grace Heer Coaching and Cuddling. My last name is spelled Heer, but pronounced like the stuff on top of your head, unless you're bald. I do a monthly in-person group cuddle, and I'm considering picking up the monthly virtual or a virtual group again, and probably would start with monthly. I'm considering it. I haven't had a whole lot of folks jump in either way. I had built a community of folks. When you're doing a virtual cuddle, you get folks from all over the world joining in. So, and I don't get to see those folks as much as I used to, as much as I'd like to. I might do a virtual again. There you go. And next time I'm up in the Bay Area, I say we meet up for coffee and cuddles.
Grace is correct. Yeah, there's a bird chirping nearby. That hour I spent speaking with her went by so quickly. The Bay Area would love to have you here. Puppy, calm down. I surpassed 2,500 listens. That's amazing. I just checked my analytics on Google Podcasts. Not that many people tune in there. I have 11 subscribers on Google Podcasts. I just received my first ever review on Apple Podcasts. One of y'all gave me 5 stars. Thank you so much. I have 66 followers on Spotify. So not every listener of mine hits the follow button, but a substantial percentage of my Spotify listeners do hit the follow button. And if you haven't done that already today, please do so right now. It'll take a fraction of a second. I should start enabling a Q&A section and a poll section on my new episodes, because that is a thing with Spotify. And if you're tuning in through a platform that I didn't mention, thank you. Pro Cuddle Hustle is a passion project for me. Your patronage is not only supporting me, but the current and aspiring cuddle professionals who listen to Pro Cuddle Hustle. If you haven't already, please leave me a review, preferably a positive one, on Spotify, YouTube, Listen Notes, Castbox, Podchaser, Podcast Addict. I'll read your review in a future episode. Please follow Pro Cuddle Hustle on all socials: Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, Twitter. I'm the moderator of r/professionalcuddling. The subreddit only has about 100 members. Please join. Tell everyone on your socials how important this professional cuddling podcast is. If you screenshot your review, put it on social media, and tag me, that will increase the likelihood of me reading your review. I also manage 2 different Facebook groups: Ask a Professional Cuddler and Professional Cuddlers and SW Only. Please only join the latter if you are a professional cuddler or a sex worker. My email address is felicityazra@gmail.com. I'm always accepting cuddle bookings in the Bay Area. Screening and deposits are mandatory. A COVID vaccination plus a booster is required. Longer bookings will be prioritized. This episode was researched by Felicity Azra. The audio and cover art for Pro Cuddle Hustle is edited by Felicity Azra. The photo for this YouTube thumbnail is of Grace Heer. It was edited in Canva by Felicity Azra. The intro and outro music for this podcast is mixed by Nella Ruiz. I found them on Fiverr. Please go support them. Also, if you are a sex worker friendly freelancer who wants to work for me, please contact me on SW Rolodex. All of this information is in the show notes. Catch y'all later. You have been listening to episode 31 of Pro Cuddle Hustle podcast.